And what happened in Las Vegas is in many ways a miracle. The police department has done such an incredible job. And we'll be talking about gun laws as time goes by.
We live in a sick country. We live in a country where it is legal for someone to purchase 30 assault weapons and unlimited ammunition. We live in a country where it's legal to buy weapons that really only have one purpose: to hunt and kill other human beings. We live in a country where a cabal of high-powered lobbyists, bought-off politicians, and merchants of death profit off of the massacres of other human beings. We live in a country where the gun manufacturers love a mass shooting. And we live in a country where the Second Amendment of the Constitution has been laundered through lobbyists and some Supreme Court justices to mean something that it does not mean. The National Rifle Association, the NRA, whose leadership would be viewed as terrorist enablers and promoters in a sane society, they don't like the first part of the Second Amendment, so much so that they don't even include it on their very public memorializing of their holy Bible of gun addiction. At the NRA's headquarters, their version of the Second Amendment doesn't include the first half of the Second Amendment. The NRA really only wants you to focus on the second half, which says, quote, "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The first part of the Second Amendment, which the NRA finds very inconvenient to include on its headquarters, states, quote, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state." Was this Las Vegas shooter a member of a well-regulated militia? No. Were any of these murderers who shoot up schools or religious assemblies or workplaces, were they members of a well-regulated militia? No. And regulated, that's an interesting word, because no thoughtful person can really argue that guns in the United States are actually regulated in any meaningful way. In fact, in this country, you can buy dozens of assault weapons. You can store enough guns and ammunition in your house or garage to wage a small war. Why? Because very powerful politicians, businesses, and their gangster-style lobbyists have twisted the meaning of the Second Amendment so intensely that it no longer even matters why it was written or what it actually was intended for. This coalition of the killing fans the flames of fear and promotes the idea that guns keep us safe, that the solution to gun killings is more guns, and they make a shitload of money off of all the death and misery and massacres. And they will make more money off of the Las Vegas massacre. You can murder 20 small, innocent children between the ages of 6 and 7 at Sandy Hook Elementary School, and these horrid villains are unmoved in their belief in the golden calf of assault rifles. If only the teachers had been armed, those kids might be alive today. Now let's check out our stock prices. It's sick. Each time we're faced with a new mass murder with guns, in this case more than 59 killed, more than 500 wounded, we end up in the same place. Let's pray. Let's tweak this law or that law. Let's talk about putting in acoustic sensors to detect gunshots. Let's put armed private security in schools. Let's use the terrorist database, the watch list, to deny gun purchases. Let's have more surveillance. Let's do religious and racial profiling, which is itself absurd given that most mass shooters are white. None of what most politicians and most TV pundits offer up in the aftermath of these killings is going to do anything to solve the real issue. We are a nation filled to the brim with guns, including assault weapons that are actually meant for assaulting people. Not for hunting, not for sport, unless your sport is murdering people. Watch what happens in Congress in the coming days. Empty platitudes, bullshit proposals, we must do something about this, and of course a lot of prayer. But none of that is going to result in any change to the fact that we live in a sick society that believes guns bring us security. A nation that has been taught by powerful, twisted people that guns are not at all part of the problem. that everything except guns and how easy they are to get is the problem. Mental illness is the problem. Muslims are the problem. Gangbangers in Chicago are the problem. Not having a gun is the problem. And when these mass shootings happen, a majority of the times the shooter is a white man. And we want to know who he was and why he did it and what was his motive, as we should. But compare that to how black victims of police killings are treated in the media. Oh, well, did they do drugs? What were they wearing at the time? Did they have a criminal record? Did they listen to hip-hop music? Where are the fathers? Trayvon Martin, after George Zimmerman killed him, was characterized as a thug, and his hooded sweatshirt was somehow evidence that he was scary or menacing. That's how black victims are portrayed. 12-year-old Tamir Rice was called a thug, with the head of Miami's police union saying after 12-year-old Tamir Rice was killed that if you act like a thug, you'll get treated like a thug. Contrast that with some of the stories we've seen about the Las Vegas shooter, not victim, shooter. One headline in the Washington Post said, and this is a quote, that he enjoyed gambling, country music, lived quiet life before massacre. Black victim is thug. White shooter is like a down on his luck character from a country western song who just happens to murder 59 people. It's sick, and this is a pattern. What if these shootings that involve white men killing large groups of people, what if they were covered the way that stories involving shooters of other races are covered on a daily basis in this country? How about this narrative? White man shoots up largely white crowd at a country western concert. White on white crime. Let's investigate country music and its violent lyrics. What role did all of this play? Where was the shooter's family? Let's find some white people brave enough to speak out on this pandemic of white men conducting mass shootings at an alarming rate. And let's make them speak for their entire race. We all know why the narratives are different. And another thing, we're once again hearing that this is the most deadly mass shooting in U.S. history. It's just not true. In fact, there are several examples of white gunmen killing huge numbers of black people. The 1917 East St. Louis massacre resulted in an estimated 100 black people being shot and lynched. 1873, between 60 and 150 black people were massacred in Colfax, Louisiana. We don't even know the exact numbers of Native Americans killed in mass shootings since the founding of the United States. Hundreds were killed in places like Sand Creek, Clear Lake, and Wounded Knee. And these are just examples of concentrated killings. And Donald Trump, who boasts that he'll be the best friend the NRA could possibly have in the White House, he suddenly found God when he first addressed the Las Vegas shooting. Let's be real. Trump's deepest connection to the Bible is watching Charlton Heston as Moses. But religious Trump, who speaks from the scriptures, was praised for his perfect tone across the media, specifically on CNN. Just what we needed to hear. A big part of our problem on guns is how it's discussed in the media. And presidents who get prayerful are praised instead of held accountable for the role that they play in sustaining this nation's gun addiction, in promoting the gun industry that profits off of the murder of our fellow human beings. When the shooter is an Arab or a Muslim, they are often immediately branded as a terrorist or a terror suspect. The president and other politicians right after Las Vegas called this shooter deranged or insane, or another word that's lost all meaning, evil. And when it's a Muslim shooter, it's perfectly acceptable to talk about what the U.S. response should be. Watch listing, banning people from coming into the country, the profiling of Muslims, surveillance of mosques. But when white people are killed, don't talk about guns. That's politicizing the killings. That disrespects the victims. Whether it's someone inspired by ISIS murdering his coworkers, or a white man shooting up a school, or a white man gunning down Sikhs because he thought they were Muslims, they all do it with guns. We don't need prayers. We don't need fake unity over the tragedy. We need to look at the common factor in all of these heinous acts of mass murder. Guns. Anything else is just talking about putting a Band-Aid on a gaping, infected, and lethal wound on our society.